and welcome to the second part of the Unity tutorial. And this time, well, I'm a little bit colder, so I've got a hat on, but we're going to look at programming and the basics of programming in Unity. What we're going to do first is just to, we're going to create a special game object, and it's going to be called Game Handler. So I created a new object, and then I'm going to rename it, and I'm going to call it Game Handler, like that. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take these three objects, including the camera, and I'm going to put them inside of that, and that's just going to keep things a bit tidy, and you can see which things are involved in the game and where the camera should be. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to set my game handler, and there are many ways you can do this, but this is one way, and we're going to add a script. So you click on Add Component, and then I type script in this little search bar, and it will find the new script, and we're going to call this script Game Handler. So if we go back to our screen down here and we click on the top folder, Assets, we should see we've got a new script in here. If I select that, I can see what's written in it here. We're going to create another folder, and I'm going to call that folder Scripts. So when we know where all our scripts will be stored, I'm going to put that in here. Then I'm going to open that up and put it in the wrong folder. I can drag it from here, and I can actually just drop it here like that. Then what we're going to do is double click on it. Now I'm using a text editor called Sublime, which I really like. It's just a nice way of editing code really quickly, but you can also use things like Visual Studio, which is a great way of programming because it helps you, and it helps you write all the functions. One way you can get that to work in Unity is if you go back to Unity, you select Preferences, at least on the Mac, External Tools, that's it, yeah, it is Preferences, Unity Preferences, and then you come up here and it's got External Script Editor. Now I'm going to change that to be Visual Studio, and that means that if I do that, when I click on my script, it will open it up in Visual Studio, and it will be able to write the code and make it really easy to edit. And there we go. In our script, we can see we've got some things at the top. They're called imports, and it allows us to import really complicated libraries that Unity or other developers or yourself may have written, and you want to import them. So it's got some basic things here, which we don't need to worry too much about, but we will add some stuff. For example, when we want to add some text elements, we'll need to add import Unity Engine UI. And then you come down here, and this is, in programming terms, this is an object or a class. We know it's a class because after the word public, which is about access levels, we have the keyword class, and after the word class you always have the name of the class, and then you have a colon. This colon is extending something called monobehavior, and monobehavior, if you hover over it, says it's a Unity Engine monobehavior. It's the base class from which every Unity script derives, and it allows us to do lots of really clever things like key detection and being able to update the game every 60 seconds. And then you have a bracket like this. I would call these squiggly brackets. You have one that opens this class and one that closes this class. So everything here that I've highlighted is inside of the class. And what do we have inside of the class? Well, we have a comment. You can tell it's a comment because you've got two slashes in front of it. This line is never executed by the computer, but it's just for you to understand what's going on. And then on the next line we have a function. Now there are many functions can do many different things, but this function will basically be the place where the game starts, and hence it's called start, and it's written for you by default when you create a new script in Unity. So line 10 is basically the first place where our game will start, and we can set up many things from here, add game characters or check things or whatever. And then below it we've got another function called update. Now update is a function that's going to be called, as it says in the description, every frame. So say there's 60 frames a second, it gets called 60 times every second, and this is the place where we can detect things like key presses or collisions, or we need to update the UI. Basically we do anything, and in the same way that classes contain things in between their squiggly brackets, functions do as well. So you can see update has an opening squiggly bracket and a closed one, so anything that we want to happen inside of that function should go here, starting from line 16. So for example, if you put code here on line 15, it would not be inside the function and it would be outside the function. You'd get an error, the code wouldn't work. So the first thing we want to do is to introduce you to the idea of variables. Variables in programming are basically a little bit like boxes, and there are many types of variables, and they can contain many different things. The two most commonly used ones are strings. So we can create a string variable at the top here, and you always write the type of thing that this variable, this box, is going to contain. And this box is going to contain a string, which is basically a piece of text. So we write the type here, and then we write the name of our variable. So what we're going to call this variable is, let's just call it name. It could be called anything you want. You could call it apples, or you could call it hello message. At the end of every line of code in C#, you need to write a colon, and then the computer knows it's got to the end of that one command, and it can start on the next. And it will the compiler will tell you when you don't do that, and it will cause an error. So we've created a variable called hello message, and it's going to be a string. So the only thing that we can have in this variable is a string. Now we can also initialize our variable. How do we do that? We use the equals sign, and then everything we put on the right hand side is going to get put into this hello message variable. So I'm going to put a message, and we're going to go hello, welcome to our game, and then I save that. The next thing we're going to do is just to test, we're going to print this out onto the screen. Now this is a really useful command that even the best developers in the world use, and it's called, you use a print command, or in Unity it's called a debug.log, and then anything you put between these curved brackets here is going to get printed out onto the console screen, which I showed you in the last video, and I'll show you again in a second. So we're going to put that message there, and then I'm going to save that, and then I'm going to leave that script. I'm going to go back to my project here and play the game here, and there you go. We have our message on the screen saying hello, welcome to our game. So that's the very first basic concept of programming. You have to understand the idea of variables, and they can contain things, and you can do things with that. You also got to remember that you need to attach scripts to game objects, so always remember that. So if you ever create a script, if you don't attach it to a game object, then you won't see anything happening. So for example, if I did remove this script from this game object, so I selected game handler, and then I went to the inspector and I removed it, and I ran the code again, you would not see this message here. There you go. So again, I'm going to attach this script to this game handler object. I can either do it by adding component, but another way, I can just grab the script and I can just drop it onto there like that. So I run the script again, and there you go, our message has appeared. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to create another type of variable. We're going to create a number, and this number is going to be something called an integer. An integer is a whole number, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It can't be 5.5 because that's not a whole number. That's actually a different type of number called a double. So this integer is going to be called score, because we want to keep a score in our game. And I'm going to initialize it at 0. And then in the same way, I'm going to copy this line, and I'm going to print the score onto the next line. So like this, and I'm going to save that. Then I'll go back to my game, I press play, and then in this console window here, you'll see our hello message, and then you'll see it printing 0, which is our score.